Hello, and this time on the Mortgage and Protection podcast, we have Paul back from Henchurch Lane to continue the conversation on mortgages for freelancers. It's great to chat with you again, Paul. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Tessa. How are you today? You well?
Good. Yes, I'm not too bad. Thank you for asking. So, part two, we've got more questions here, haven't we, for our freelancers?
Okay, yes, let's get them answered then.
Okay, so the first one that we've got here asks, are mortgages for freelancers more expensive?
Okay, so as a rule, no. A freelancer could technically obtain almost all of the same rates as someone who is employed, for argument's sakes. Depending on the status of their particular income situation, there could be scenarios where they need to approach, let's say, a specialist lender. And in those cases, the rates are likely then to be higher than what you're probably going to find on the high street. So a few reasons why that could be the case for someone who is a freelancer or self-employed in general, acting as a freelancer, rather than me just saying it could be a specialist lender situation. A couple of things that might lead us down that route would be things like being paid by an umbrella company, a change of the employment setup within the latest year. So let's say they went from being a sole trader to a limited company, or they went from being employed to being a freelancer. That could result in you having to go down the road of a slightly more expensive lender. And if, say, for instance, you had a small amount of trading history, or you changed the industry that you came from. So let's say you've changed your industry completely and you've only got 6 months worth of trading as a freelancer. That could result in you having to go down that specialist route as an outcome of being a freelancer. But other than that, minus all of those additional complications, you should have access to exactly the same rates as anyone else.
Okay, so that's good news there, but a few points to bear in mind. So let's move on to the next question. Now, you might have touched on this in part one, but what do I need to do to apply for a mortgage as a freelancer?
Okay, so initially, you're going to need to provide some of the things that, again, everyone else does, right? So name and address proof, your latest 3 months personal bank statements, your credit report, so that can be assessed by your broker, just to make sure that obviously you get in place with the correct lender for your credit status. But then on top of that, you're going to need some additional bits as well. So income proof, that needs to be solid. So if you're paid as a sole trader, you're going to have access to things called SA 302s, also known as tax calculations. And these come hand in hand with something called tax year overview documents. And these are documents produced by HMRC off the back of you submitting your income to those guys. If you've got a limited company set up as a freelancer, then you're going to need to produce company accounts and company bank statements on top of that as well. And if you're on some sort of contract, which you can be as a freelancer as well, then having copies of that to hand is going to be requested or required from you by the underwriter on your application too.
Okay, so a breakdown there of all the documents that you need and a step-by-step mini guide there, I think. So that's brilliant.
You're
Thank
very
you for
welcome.
that. There we go. So let's move on then. Can I get a buy-to-let mortgage as a freelancer? So any differences in that process?
Yes, you can get a buy-to-let mortgage. To answer that in a roundabout way, you can get a buy-to-let mortgage with no income at all. The affordability for those types of mortgages are predominantly driven by the rental income and what the property is going to achieve on a rental basis. And what we tend to find is the biggest barrier to obtaining a buy-to-let mortgage, rather than being the income or the employment type, is actually the deposit. So typically a lender is going to ask for around the sort of 25% mark for a buy-to-let deposit. So if you've got that and you're looking to invest in property, then don't worry about what type of employment you're in. Have a chat with the broker and then they'll be able to discuss your options with you, regardless of what your personal earnings are.
Okay, well, again, that's good news, positive news there. Um, Now, this is a popular question no matter what, but in this case, can I
Mm.
get a mortgage as a freelancer if I have bad credit?
Yeah. Okay. So the bad credit thing obviously always comes up. People think, based on their situation, whether or not it's a deal breaker if they've got bad credit because of something else. The easiest way to answer this is on a basis that there's three main factors when looking to apply for a mortgage that a broker should assess before they look to place your case. Right? One of them is a credit score. So that's going to determine what lenders are going to be willing to offer you a loan purely based on your credit status. Right? So if your credit is poor, then the list of lenders that you're going to be left with will likely be what we call subprime, mid-prime, or specialist. So the lenders that you're not likely to find on the high street and probably a little bit more expensive. Okay, so that's going to leave you a list of lenders to be looking at based on your specific credit score. Next is affordability. So what will each lender lend to you as a maximum loan based on your income situation and your affordability? Okay, so then that's going to potentially then chop down that pool of lenders again. And finally, it's going to be the criteria. So what lenders will lend to you based on your particular circumstances. So the type of employment contract, the deposit amount that you've got, the property type you're looking at, and things like that. You're then going to be hopefully left with a short list of lenders that it all fits with, right? And then it's going to be recommendation time, which one of those lenders is best suited. And that's generally going to come down to price or your features and your benefits at that stage.
Okay, well, there we go. Some clear key pointers to take away from the episode there then. So we're getting through these questions for our part 2 episode. So can I get a joint mortgage as a freelancer? So how does that work?
Yes, you can. So very similar to the last question, a broker will go through the same process, whether it's one or two applicants. So credit score, affordability, criteria, and then recommendation. A joint applicant can actually benefit someone with, let's say, less than a perfect credit score or a really complex income situation, assuming that their credit score is better and their income situation isn't more complicated. But likewise, if those things aren't the case, then it can actually hinder you. So it really just depends on what they're bringing to the table. So that's again something that you'd sit down and go through with your broker and decide whether or not it's gonna help or hinder you.
Right. Okay. Which leads us on to the next question. So how can I boost my chances of getting a mortgage as a freelancer?
Okay. So boosting your chances for a mortgage application, same as anyone else. Okay. The bigger the deposit, the better. And the better your credit score, the easier time you're going to have just in general. In terms of being a freelancer in particular, keep an up-to-date record of all of your documentation, all of your income, all of your pay, all of your taxes, make sure they're all paid on time. And try your best to make your income as consistent as possible as well. And now, obviously, that's really easier said than done sometimes, depending on how seasonal your work might be. But if you do have consistency throughout pay in general, it does make mortgage applications a lot easier. So if you can do that, then that's a good place to start.
Okay, well, some top tips there. Thank you for that. Now, this is an interesting question. So should I go freelance or wait for my mortgage to go through?
That is interesting. Excuse me. So it's difficult to ask without knowing the specifics around the deal. But I would say if you're in the midst of an application right now, there's a good chance that the advice would be to wait. However, if you do have a mortgage right now or that you want one in the near future and you're considering changing any employment type, whether that be, from employed to self-employed to freelance, whatever, then my advice would be to discuss that with a broker and specifically break down exactly what it is that you're looking to do, when you're looking to do it, and basically go through with them how your choices would impact your borrowing potential going forwards. And you'll tend to find that sometimes some very small tweaks to your choices or to your intentions could be the difference between it being a deal breaker or not. Okay, so they might say to you, we'll leave that until this month, or do that a little bit sooner because your fixed rate's coming to an end, or this ties in with lots of different things that could result in it being a little bit easier for your application day. So definitely have a chat. Even if you've got a mortgage right now, if you've got a broker and you're thinking in a year's time that you want to go self-employed or become a freelancer, have that conversation with your broker to make sure you're not tripping yourself up unnecessarily.
Right. Okay. So something to bear in mind there. Another key pointer. Now, as always, you've demonstrated how a mortgage broker can help here, but is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, we've covered questions in part one, haven't we? We've covered more questions on our part two episode, but any final thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts are you can see that obviously it's quite layered when it comes to deciding on where to place business based on your specific circumstances. So, having a chat at the earliest stage possible and just breaking those things down, and a broker will have the ability then to pull the pieces together and just make sure that you're making the right choices at the right time and giving yourself the best chance of not only getting the mortgage, but not having a massive headache when it comes to it. So the sooner the better. Sit down and just thrash that detail out so you know where you stand with everything. That would be my advice.
Okay, there we go. Well, a great note to end on there. Thank you for that as always. And I'm sure we'll catch you on another episode soon.
I'm sure we will. Speak to you soon, Tessa.